Welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling complementary therapy, all thanks to that RoleCatcher research you sent our way.
Absolutely. It's a hot topic for sure.
It really is. So let's jump right in. For those tuning in who might be new to all this, what exactly does a complementary therapist even do?
Well, they're kind of like the bridge between, traditional medicine and all things holistic well-being.
Right, like connecting those two worlds.
Exactly. They work with the mind, the body, and even the spirit using practices, like acupuncture, aromatherapy, things like that.
So we're talking about practices that have been around for centuries, but they're really gaining traction these days.
They really are. And
Yeah.
there's a reason for that. People are like really seeking out these non-traditional approaches to health, especially for chronic conditions.
Makes sense. Especially with so many people searching for, natural remedies and ways to take control of their well-being.
Exactly. It's about that mind-body connection and empowering people to be active participants in their own health journey.
Okay, so let's dive into the day-to-day a bit. When I think complementary therapist, I picture like a tranquil spa setting, maybe some Enya playing softly in the background. Is that even remotely accurate?
Well, sometimes, yeah. You got your spas for sure, but also clinics, even home offices. Telemedicine is huge now.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that
Oh,
diverse.
yeah. It really runs the gamut. So you'd be in a spa one day, then doing online consultations the next. Talk about flexibility, right?
That's for sure. But let's be real, it can't be all essential oils and good vibes.
Mm,
What's the flip side, the challenging side of this career path?
yeah, good point. It's definitely demanding. You're not just performing treatments, you're building trust, educating clients, and, constantly advocating for this whole approach to well-being.
Right, because there's still some skepticism surrounding complementary
For
therapy.
sure. Some people don't see it as real medicine.
Exactly. So, how do you navigate that as a practitioner? How do you address that skepticism and show that what you do is, legitimate and effective?
Honestly, it's about being upfront, acknowledging that, yeah, not every single therapy out there has tons of research behind it yet. But there's growing evidence for many practices. It's about staying informed, being able to speak to that research.
So, like, if a client comes to you skeptical about acupuncture, for example, you'd be ready to talk about the science behind it.
Exactly. I might mention that study from name of university research institution that found acupuncture could be really helpful for chronic pain.
Interesting. Because I was just about to ask what's driving this surge in popularity for complementary therapies? Is it just a fad or is there more to it?
Oh, it's definitely more than a fad. I think a lot of it ties into what we were talking about earlier, that desire for a more holistic approach to health.
Right, moving away from just treating symptoms and looking at the whole person.
Exactly. Take that study I just mentioned.
Huh.
It's not about ditching traditional treatments completely. It's about adding tools to the toolbox, right?
I see what you mean. So it's about finding what works for each individual, combining approaches if needed.
Exactly. And it's interesting, RoleCatcher pulled out some stats on this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually predicts a huge increase in demand for complementary therapists,
Oh, really? How huge are we talking?
like a whopping 13% growth rate between 2019 and 2029, way faster than other healthcare fields.
Wow, that's significant. So for someone thinking, hey, maybe this is the career for me, what are we talking about in terms of actual job prospects?
It's a good question. It's tricky, right? Because you've got this growing demand, but it's not always the most stable in terms of job security.
So not like walking into a traditional 9 to 5.
Not always, no. You might need to be a bit entrepreneurial, build a client base, that kind of thing.
I see it takes a certain kind of person.
It does. But the good news is there's a niche for everyone. RoleCatcher's research highlighted so many areas of focus within complementary therapy.
Like what? Give me some examples.
We'll see acupuncture, we talked about that, herbal medicine, even things I had to look up, like sophrology.
Sophrology. I've never even heard of that one.
Right. It's amazing how many paths you can take.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all career. You can really tailor your skills to what resonates with you.
Absolutely. But of course, like any career, there are stages.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
So walk me through that journey. What does it actually look like to climb the career ladder in complementary therapy? Where do you even begin?
Well, typically you'd start at entry level, fresh out of your training. It's a lot of learning the ropes, shadowing, you know, like an apprenticeship.
So not diving right into treating clients on day one,
Not quite. You might assist, focus on client education, that kind of thing.
getting those foundational skills down pat.
Exactly. And then As you gain experience, you move into that junior therapist role.
Hmm.
That's when you start conducting your own consultations, developing those personalized treatment plans.
So more responsibility, more hands-on experience.
Absolutely. And that client interaction, that's key.
I bet. So you're building confidence, mastering the basics. What's next on this career ladder?
Well, the next rung would be mid-level therapist. And this is where things get really interesting, in my opinion. You start specializing, delving deeper into those complex treatments.
Ah, so like if you're passionate about a certain modality, you can really hone in on that.
Exactly. And you might start collaborating more with other healthcare providers, like doctors,
Mm.
physical therapists, building those bridges we talked about earlier.
Right, because it's all about that integrated approach to healthcare.
Exactly. And, this is often the stage where therapists start mentoring those newer to the field.
Passing on that knowledge and experience.
Exactly. It's like giving back, helping shape the next generation of practitioners.
Right. I love that. Okay, so we've climbed the ladder. We're at the top now. What does it mean to be a senior complementary therapist? What sets them apart?
At that level, it becomes much more than just individual client work. Senior therapists are often in leadership roles, maybe managing a team or even influencing policy, shaping the direction of the whole field.
Wow, so they have the potential to make a real impact on a larger scale.
Absolutely. And it's inspiring, to see how far someone can go from those early days of shadowing and assisting.
It really is. And speaking of those early days, one thing that struck me about RoleCatcher's research was their emphasis on the job application process.
Oh, yeah, their tools are amazing.
Seriously, their CV builder is like ridiculously helpful. I was playing around with it earlier, and it's so user-friendly.
It takes the guesswork out of it, because highlighting your skills in this field, it's a bit different than a traditional resume.
Right. It's about showcasing those unique qualities that make a good complementary therapist.
Exactly. Like that empathy, that ability to truly listen and connect with clients. Those are things you can't just list as bullet points.
And that's where RoleCatcher comes in. They help you articulate all of that.
Exactly. They even have this cool feature that analyzes job descriptions and tells you what skills to highlight.
Oh, wow. It's like having a career coach in your back pocket.
Right. They've really thought of everything. And it's not just about the CV. They even have this AI-powered interview practice tool.
Wait, really? Tell me more about that, because that sounds incredible, especially for someone who might be nervous about interviews.
Oh, it's a game changer. Basically, you choose practice questions from their library. And they have a ton of questions specifically for complementary therapy. You record yourself answering. And then their AI analyzes everything.
Everything. Like what?
Like your responses, obviously, but also your tone of voice, your body language, all those subtle cues.
Wow. So it's like having a virtual mirror reflecting back how you come across.
Exactly. And it gives you feedback like maybe you're using too many filler words or you need to project your voice more confidently, things like that.
Things you wouldn't necessarily pick up on yourself.
Exactly. It's like having a secret weapon for nailing those interviews.
I love it. It's all about putting your best foot forward and showcasing your passion for this field. Because as we've been talking, it's become clear that complementary therapy, it's more than just a job. It's a calling.
Absolutely. You have to be passionate about it because you're working with people at such a deep level.
Right. It's about empowering people to take control of their well-being, to make healthy choices.
Exactly. And that takes a special kind of person, someone who's empathetic, a good listener, and truly believes in the power of this approach to health.
And as we mentioned earlier, more and more people are resonating with this approach. The demand for complementary therapies is growing, and with that comes a real opportunity to make a difference.
It's an exciting time to be in this field, that's for sure. There's so much potential, not just for individual practitioners, but for how we think about healthcare as a society.
It feels like a pivotal moment. So what do you envision for the future of complementary therapy? What are you most excited about?
What really excites me is the potential for true integration. Like, imagine a world where complementary therapies are just seen as part of healthcare, not alternative or fringe.
Right, not this separate thing, but woven into the fabric of how we approach health and wellness.
Exactly. Where doctors and complementary therapists work side by side, collaborating to create truly personalized treatment plans.
That's the dream, right? Recognizing that we're not just a collection of symptoms, but whole beings with unique needs.
Precisely. And complementary therapy, it gets that. It addresses that interconnectedness of the mind, body, and spirit.
It's about treating the whole person, not just the disease.
Exactly. And the more research that emerges, the more we see how powerful this approach can be.
Absolutely, and thankfully, we have resources like RoleCatcher to help guide people on this path, whether they're just starting out or looking to take their career to the next level.
They really do make it so much easier, especially with all the information and tools they provide.
It's like having a support system every step of the way. And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into complementary therapy. We've talked about what they do, why it's gaining popularity, even touched on some of the challenges.
And now RoleCatcher can help navigate all that.
Exactly. But I'm curious, with all these different specializations within complementary therapy, where do you even begin to narrow it down?
Well, that's a journey in itself.
It really is.
It's about figuring out what truly resonates with you, where your passions lie.
So, let's say someone's listening and they're feeling drawn to this field, but they're overwhelmed by the options.
I've been there.
What advice would you give them? How do you choose a path that feels right?
Honestly, I think it starts with introspection. Like, what are you passionate about? What are your strengths?
Because it's got to be more than just picking something trendy, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is about a career, a lifelong pursuit,
Right.
potential.
Exactly. So, thinking long term, how does that choice of specialization play out as you progress through different career stages?
That's where things get really interesting. Remember those career stages RoleCatcher outlined?
Yeah, from entry level all the way to senior practitioner.
Right. So let's say you're just starting out, you're entry level, fresh out of training.
Eager beaver, ready to go.
Totally. But
Yeah.
at that stage, it's more about observation, assisting.
Like an apprenticeship.
Exactly. You're shadowing experienced practitioners, learning the ropes, soaking it all in.
So not necessarily treating clients solo just yet.
Not quite. You're building that foundation, that hands-on experience, but under guidance.
Makes sense. You got to walk before you can run, right?
Exactly. Then, as you gain confidence and competence, you transition into that junior therapist role.
Okay, so what's different at that stage? More responsibility.
Definitely. You're starting to conduct those independent consultations, developing your own treatment plans.
Wow, so it's becoming more autonomous.
Exactly. You're taking the lead, but still with a bit of a safety net.
Right, like you can always consult with more senior practitioners if needed.
Exactly. It's a collaborative field even at those early stages.
I love that. Okay, so you've mastered the basics, you're comfortable with clients. What comes next?
That's when you level up to mid-level therapist. This is where things get really exciting, at least for me.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What makes this stage so special?
This is where you really start to specialize, to delve deeper into those complex treatments we talked about earlier.
Ah, so if you're passionate about, say, herbal medicine, this is where you really hone in on that.
Exactly. You might even take additional courses, get certified in a specific modality.
So it's about becoming that go-to expert in your chosen niche.
Exactly. And at this stage, you might also start collaborating more with other healthcare providers.
Oh, interesting. Like who?
You name it. Doctors, nurses, physical therapists, chiropractors, the list goes on.
Wow, so it's about bridging those gaps between different approaches to healthcare.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all working towards the same goal, helping people achieve optimal well-being.
It's about that integrated, holistic approach that we keep talking about.
Exactly. And another cool thing about this stage is you often start mentoring those newer to the field.
Ah, so it comes full circle. You were once that eager beaver, and now you're guiding the next generation.
Exactly. It's about sharing your knowledge, your passion, your experience.
I love that. All right, so we've climbed the ladder. We're at the top, senior practitioner. What does that look like in the world of complementary therapy?
At that level, it often goes beyond individual client work. You're thinking bigger picture.
Okay, like what?
Well, you might manage a team of practitioners, maybe even run your own clinic.
Wow, so it becomes more entrepreneurial at that level.
It can be, yeah. Or you might be involved in research or policy development, really shaping the future of the field.
So you have the potential to make a real impact on a larger scale.
Absolutely. It's about advocating for this approach to health and wellness, educating the public, maybe even influencing healthcare policy.
Wow, that's incredible. It's amazing to think how far you can go from those early days of shadowing and assisting.
It really is a journey. And the cool thing is, there's no one right path. It's about finding what works for you, what aligns with your passions and strengths.
And thankfully, we have resources like RoleCatcher to guide us along the way.
Seriously, Their tools and resources are invaluable for anyone considering this career path.
I'm so glad we got to dive into that today.
Me too. It's inspiring, to see so many people embracing this holistic approach to health and well-being.
It really is. And speaking of embracing this approach, we've talked a lot about the what of complementary therapy, but let's get into the who. What kind of person thrives in this field?
That's a great question. It's not just about having a knack for, say, acupuncture or massage. It goes deeper than that.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? What are those essential qualities that make a great complementary therapist?
Well, empathy is huge. You got to be able to really connect with people, understand their struggles, their hopes.
Right, because you're not just treating a symptom, you're working with a whole person.
Exactly. So
Hmm.
being a good listener, that's key.
Hmm.
And being non-judgmental, creating a safe space for people to open up.
It's about building trust, right?
Hmm.
Making that client feel heard and understood.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, you need that genuine passion for holistic health, that belief in the power of these modalities to facilitate healing.
Because if you don't believe it, your clients won't either.
Exactly. You got to walk the talk.
I hear that. So it's a combination of those soft skills, that empathy and connection, with the technical knowledge and skills of your chosen modality.
Exactly. And I think for a lot of people, finding that balance, that's where the real magic happens.
The magic. I love that. And speaking of magic, I got to bring up RoleCatcher again because their platform really does feel magical sometimes.
Right. They just make it so easy.
Seriously, like their job searching tools, the way they match your skills to relevant openings, it's amazing.
It's like they took all the stress out of job hunting.
Right. And their resources, like the articles and videos on different complementary therapies, so helpful for anyone exploring this field.
Oh, yeah. It's like having a whole library at your fingertips.
It really is. Okay, so we've talked about the qualities, the career paths, the resources. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the skepticism surrounding complementary therapy.
Ah, yes. That old chestnut.
Because it's real, right? People have doubts. They want to see the evidence.
And rightfully so. It's their health we're talking about.
Exactly. So how can complementary therapists as a whole better address that skepticism? What needs to happen to gain wider acceptance?
Well, for starters, more research. Always more research. We need that solid scientific evidence to back up what we do.
Right, because anecdotal evidence is great, but it's not enough.
Exactly. We need those rigorous studies published in reputable journals to really demonstrate the efficacy of these modalities.
And not just for, like, one specific condition, but across the board for all sorts of health concerns.
Absolutely. And I think we also need to do a better job of educating the public, breaking down those misconceptions and myths.
Right, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Oh, tons. And it's up to us as practitioners to be those ambassadors, to provide accurate, evidence-based information.
So it's about meeting people where they're at, acknowledging their concerns, and then presenting the facts.
Exactly. And when we do that, when we approach those conversations with compassion and understanding, I think we can really start to shift perceptions.
I love that because ultimately it's about expanding access to healthcare, giving people more options for taking control of their well-being.
Exactly. Whether it's acupuncture, aromatherapy, mindfulness, whatever resonates with them, people deserve to have access to these modalities.
Absolutely. And with platforms like RoleCatcher paving the way, connecting practitioners with opportunities and resources, the future of complementary therapy is looking brighter than ever.
It really is an exciting time to be part of this movement toward a more holistic and integrative approach to healthcare.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the fascinating world of complementary therapy.
Always a pleasure.
To our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and maybe even inspired you to explore this field further. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep taking care of yourselves holistically, of course.